Now, friends, in some textures you have downloaded from certain texture sites, there are some channels. These are referred to as channels. In other words, the names of these maps are channels. So the places you apply them to are referred to as channels. I'm telling you this so you won't feel unfamiliar. In D5, Corona, SketchUp, V-Ray, Enscape, and Twinmotion, you apply these textures to these channels. Each of these textures has a meaning or significance. I want to briefly summarize them. The color of the coating labeled base color, friends. You say open from here. Look, the file opened like this. When I use this coating, I will see this coating on the ground. While using this coating, look, I need to apply these to other channels for objects, like roughness and reflection, to be more effective. However, there's a nice feature in Enscape, friends. It creates the reflection maps we call normal map or roughness map itself. That's why we say it's a very simple and very easy render engine. So these are not needed. When you assign just this, it creates the other two itself. But I will show all of them. Look, there is a map called ambient occlusion here. This map is used in Corona, V-Ray, Twinmotion, and D5. It is not used in Enscape. This is the map with white stripes, friends. The map we will use here is the base color. Here the reflection map we call normal map and roughness map, friends. Apart from that, if we want, when we provide just this map, it creates the rest itself. Now let's go back to our map and create it, friends. Look, in this part, I'm reducing this section. I came here, I reset the coating part from this section here. I pressed the plus part. I said, groundwood, friends. I said, okay. I went from here to the edit section, from the coating section, from the interior section, to the coatings we will use, and I came to this part and selected this section. Look, I selected the base color. I said, open, friends. The coating part came here, as you can see. Then I selected the ground and marked this from the ground. And as you can see, the coating came here, friends. Now let's go and check our coating. Look, my coating looks matter because it doesn't have embossing, normal map, or reflection map. If you see matteness in a render, know that you haven't provided reflection or embossing maps to the textures in that render engine, friends. This usually happens a lot in V-Ray renders. It also happens a lot in Enscape. Such situations cause the texture to lose its effect, friends. That's why it's an important part. Look, as you can see, now we will do these. Let's do it from the part that receives light. It receives both shadow and light to show, friends. I clicked on the checkered flag. Look, my active coating has appeared, friends, because it shows you the active coating in SketchUp here. Look, it will come now. When it first opens, it gives these error messages. Look, it has arrived. When I say it creates the texture itself, if you use the use part here, it creates the normal map. If you say use from the reflection part, it creates the reflection map. I have one bump map and one reflection map. Look, I created the bump map. Look, it gave the value of 3. It created it. You cannot see the effect of the bump map here without providing the reflection map. I also created the reflection map. Look now, friends. Look, a reflection has appeared here. Look. Did you see? We have seen a reflection. And the texture's here, friends. That's the situation. Look, it's saving right now. Once the saving is done, I will show you this screen by turning it around. Let me show you the value of 3 in the bump map like this, friends. Sometimes there can be such lags. Look at the reflection and bump maps. Look, though, the bumps on the texture here determine these 3 parts. Look, I will make this 6. See how bumpy it has become. I made it 10. See how bumpy it has become, and you can see the reflection map. Look, the reflections have also come here. This is related to the bump map and reflection map created within the texture itself. Now let's close these. And let's upload our own. Let's upload our own textures. Let's see what kind of effect we will get. Friends, I came here from texture. I went to the interior section here. I selected the normal map from here. You need to select the normal map. In the part labeled height map, friends, I said open. Look, it will load the normal map here. Look, it has arrived. The current value is at 100. In the reflection section, you select the part labeled roughness, which is black and white here. I selected it. And as you can see, look how much the situation has changed this way. As you can see, friends, I will go back a little. Currently, it's in the process of saving again. Look like this. As you can see, this is the kind of effect. Again, the 100% effect here shows how effective my normal map is, or rather the roughness, the bumpiness there. Look at this. As you can see, this is the kind of effect. Again, the 100% effect here shows how effective my normal map is, or rather, the roughness, the medium bumpiness here. Look, I'm taking this. When I increase it, look now, friends, do you see how much it has increased? That's why it's necessary to keep these at a certain level. If you want to decrease it, you can lower it downwards. I slightly pulled it to the 90% part, friends. I adjusted it this way. You don't necessarily have to use the reflection map here. Let's say the reflection here is too much. For example, this reflection bothered you. You would do it like this. You turn this off. You say, create it yourself. Look, it created it itself. This is what happens, friends. You can use both this and the other part. But I will show you a fine detail here, friends. Look now. It created this itself. Look. There's a fine adjustment here. I want to show it. Look here. There's a color of a coating color. So there's a color box. Look, when you select it, normally, when you drag this part down, the reflection here will also increase. As long as this part is black, the reflection increases. Look, friends, here it's white. Look, it's completely white. The reflection became dull. When I drag this down, look, the reflection appeared. As you can see, I don't necessarily have to use my own texture. Well, I can use Enscape's own texture and adjust the settings from here using the parameters Enscape provides me. Friends, it's really a nice topic. It says you can use your own texture if you want, or it says you can use the settings I provide from within. It says you will get a quality effect in both ways. Look, we have achieved a quality effect here in this way. This is how the use of external textures works, friends. I will also provide you with the 3 different texture libraries you see here. You can use these. I will also talk about texture downloading sites. I will also talk about where you can download which textures and how you can use them. Friends, this was our lesson on acquiring textures from external sources. We have seen this in this way as well. In our next lesson, we will continue with the settings again, friends.